Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study at looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus. Today, we're hitting where Jesus walks on water, and this is from Matthew, Mark, and John. We've got the verses listed here, and if you can follow along in our study guide, they're in there as well. And so we see here. Yesterday, we looked at Jesus feeding the 5,000. The which, if you go back and look, more than likely was around 10 to 15,000 people. It was 5,000 men. And so after this happens, um after he's fed everyone, Jesus says, like, he tells the disciples to go back in the boat and go across the other side of the lake while he sent the people home. He did this so that after he sent them home, he could be up in the hills by himself and pray. And if you remember, right, he had originally gone to get away from, he had heard about John the Baptist being murdered, and so he was trying to get away from this, and these large crowds kept following him. So he's instead of saying, "Hey, leave me alone," I'm trying to. He dealt with the people. He Dealt's probably a bad word to use there. He sympathized with them. He met their needs. He fed them, and then after feeding them, teaching them, he sent them on their way again. In this way again, so he can be in solitude. And so he went up into the hills to pray, right? And so night fell. And so what happened was the disciples were out on the water, and again, which was common on the Sea of Galilee. The winds picked up, and it started getting wavy and a little more dangerous. And so Jesus comes walking up to them on the water. Now they're looking out and they see this, and they cry out in fear, and they're terrified because they think it's a ghost. Which I get this one because back in that day, you didn't see, even with Jesus's, the things that they'd seen Jesus do, walking on water probably didn't fall into that category. And so Jesus cries out to him, says, "Hey, don't be afraid." He says, "Take courage, I'm here." And so Peter called out and was like, you gotta love Peter. I love Peter because I relate to him so much. He says, "If it's really you, then tell me to come out and walk on this water." And so he said, "Yes, come." And he did. So Peter walked out the side of the boat and actually walked on the water, but he started to notice the winds and the waves, and he started to get terrified. So the verse here says terrified, and he began to sink, and he cried out to the Lord to save him. And Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him, and he says, "You have so little faith." He says, "Why do you doubt me?" And we can relate to this. We'll talk about it. And when they climbed back in the boat, the wind stopped. So Jesus stopped the wind again. And then the disciples worshiped, and he says, "You really are the Son of God," they exclaimed. Now, if you remember last time, whenever they were in a storm and they were afraid, and they called on Jesus he calmed the sea then, and they questioned, "Who is this guy?" This time, a little short time later, this happens, and they're like, "Okay, you are the Son of God. We get it. We get who you are. You're walking on water. You're raising people from the dead. You tell the storms to stop, and they stop." And so they got it. And so the one thing I want to go back and focus on with the start of this is we see Jesus again seeking solitude, and it was very important for him to do that. And I want to emphasize on that. If it's important for him to do that, then it's important for us to do that. It is important for us to get away in solitude and prayer. If Jesus needed to get away and pray, then we definitely do. And so we need to make sure that we're taking and time that. He made time in his busy schedule to make sure that he was alone with the Father, right? Spending time with God in prayer, it nurtures us, right? It's vital for our relationship with Jesus. Like, and it's like any type of relationship, right? If I don't ever take time to spend time and talk to my wife, well, me and her aren't going to have a very good relationship. We need to sit down. We need to take and spend time together and have that. So it's very important. So we see this whole scene play out where they had already gone out. We see the storm come up. Obviously, they're terrified. They see this, what they think's a ghost out on the water, because a physical person shouldn't be walking on water. It's just, as we know, it's impossible. And so they thought it was a spirit or a ghost. And so Jesus says, "Hey, it's not, it's me, right? Don't be afraid." And so Peter, right, is like, in his typical Peter fashion, like, "Well, if it's you, then let me do this, or tell me to do this." And so, a lot of people are like, "Well, Peter was putting Jesus to the test." No, he wasn't putting Jesus to the test, all right, we're told not to do. We see that in Matthew 4:7. Instead, he was the only one in the boat to react in faith, saying, "Hey, if it is you, I have enough faith to let me come out on there." And so his little impulsive request led him to experience a rather unusual demonstration of God's power. And so, as far as we know, Jesus and Peter are the only two people who've ever been able to walk on water. And so Peter starts to sink. He starts to sink because he took his eyes off Jesus and focused on the high waves around him. His faith wavered, right? He realized when he realized what was happening, right? And I don't know. I don't know if Peter, like, it happened so fast that he just didn't have time to realize what he was doing, or he was really trusting Jesus. But the minute he started to realize all the craziness going on around him, and so we need to realize if we focus on the waves, right? If we focus on the waves of difficult circumstances around us without faith in Jesus to help, we too may just, get afraid and sink. And it's a perfect example for us because there's so many like of us that start out with really good intentions, but and we're focused on Jesus, but then like the troubles of life, right? The things happen. We have issues that come up and all that. And so we start to falter, right? Our state starts to falter. And so the thing is here is we got to realize it doesn't mean that we failed, right? Because and I like this idea, this thought that Peter didn't fail, right? He took his eyes off Jesus and he started to fall. But what did he do, right? What did he do when he started to fall? He reached out to Christ for help. He reached out to Jesus for help, the only one who could help him in that situation. And so he was afraid, but he still looked to Christ. And that's where we've got it. We're not going to get like, we're not going to set out on our Christian journey and just have it all together the whole time. It's not going to be perfect. We're not going to just, not falter and not, we're going to fail. And sometimes failure can be very good learning experiences. I think this is a good learning experience for Peter. And I think we see that play out throughout the rest of the New Testament. But what we've got to learn to do is in our failures, where we falter, where we have issues, like, right, when the storms of life, if you will, start to be too much for us and we lose our focus, then we need to make sure that we refocus on Jesus. We call out to him for help and we look for him to help, because if that's the only way we're going to be able to get ourselves out of the messes that we get ourselves into. Just like Peter gets himself into a lot of messes. We see this. We're going to see this as we go through. He likes to open his mouth, before he thinks things through. And that's why I'll relate to Peter a lot. Like, Peter had a lot of passion. Peter had a lot of good intentions, but he would open his mouth a lot of times before he thought it all the way through about what he was said, and I can relate to that a lot. And so I really appreciate Peter in this moment of being able to see and learn from him. Of he had faith and he set it out and he was doing good, but then he took took his eyes off Jesus, and he started to focus on things other than Christ. And he started to focus on the storms and the winds and the waves around him, and so he started to sink. But he still knew to reach out to Jesus or cry out to Jesus for help, and we need to make sure we understand that and we do that same thing. So, wonderful story here. I love at the end of this how we see again the the apostles here, like, okay, surely this man is the Son of God, right? They knew it this time. There was no question behind it. It's like there wasn't question, who is this guy who can do this? They knew it and they say it this time. And I love that. And we need to make sure we have that same understanding of who Jesus was, who he is, and that he is the Son of God. And he's the one we need to make sure we stay focused on, we keep our faith in, and we position ourselves to be more like him and focus on him every single day. As always, I appreciate everyone for watching the video. If it's been beneficial to you, please share it. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please go ahead and do so. We're going to continue to do just little small defos like this every single day. And we're going to dive into some deeper studies as we go along as well. And so I just encourage you to subscribe if you hadn't. And as always, I appreciate you for watching.